John, you probably know it. I'm a big fan of John Kingston, FreightWaves. I really am. I love watching what you do on FreightWaves. If you don't know it, you at least act like you know it, John. And you're the fuel expert.
I can kind of, BS my way through,
So talk to us a little bit. We're going to talk about fuel because, you the drivers out there, listen, I'm not telling you anything you don't know right now. When you're filling that tank up right now, that extra 300 gallons costs you an extra $1.25 a gallon. You're spending the money. John, before we get into the fuel, tell us a little bit, what makes you the expert on the fuel side?
Well, before I was at FreightWaves, I was, for almost 30 years, I was with an organization called Platts. When I joined it, it was part of McGraw-Hill. McGraw-Hill has kind of evolved to be S&P Global. And I did a lot of jobs there. I was the head of oil for a while, the head of news, the editor-in-chief of a publication called Oilgram News, and did a lot of TV work on Fox Business and CNBC. So I've been involved in oil for a while, and then I moved into a corporate role at S&P Global, where I still did some oil stuff, and then unfortunately got reorged out, which happens in the corporate world, and landed at FreightWaves. And certainly my fuel background, my oil industry background, in an industry where fuel costs are the second biggest expense after labor, came in handy. So I've continued to write about oil as well as trucking for FreightWaves.
Have you ever seen an environment like we're in right now regarding oil?
No, not this fast. I do go back. The two other times in my history that I would refer back to would be the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait in August 1990, and the price shot up and then stayed kind of steady for a while. It had some dips, and then once it became obvious that the U.S. was going to win that war quickly, it plummeted. The all-time high, well, the previous all-time high before now, in 2008, was that was more of a slow climb. It started to drop pretty fast, and then you had the whole Lehman Brothers thing, and then it really plummeted. So this craziness of the past couple of weeks, it's just been, it is unprecedented. I have not seen it.
Is there any relief in sight?
Well, I don't know. Here it is. We're sitting here on Monday, and I can tell you that the last I looked about an hour ago, the price of ultra-low sulfur diesel on the CME, which is the basic building block of the price you pay at the pump, was up like another 22 cents. It dropped like 97 cents in one day last week. It is just nuts. It really is.
So when we talk about fuel, and listen, it's for me on the freight side of the business, I'm just going to tell you is that when fuel goes up the way it has, we have seen a major decrease in the freight volume being shipped out. I just can't help but think that fuel, when it is doing what it's doing now, right? When we see these big jumps, it's taking away the extra spending from the consumer out there.
Let me tell you one little story that kind of emphasizes that. I used to go to a meeting called the Society of Independent Gasoline Marketers of America, and they run a lot of convenience stores. So the last time I went to one of their meetings was in spring 2008. That's when the price was really soaring. And you'd think like the high prices at the gas station, hey, maybe they're making a lot of money. These guys were apoplectic. They were screaming about the price because exactly what you say. The driver pulls up, he empties his wallet to fill his tank. He doesn't have money to go into the convenience store to spend. So that's a microeconomic case, and of course it's very close to the pump. But I think what you're saying is right on a more macroeconomic view too.
Gotcha. So I'm a big user of Sonar. The folks out there, I do a FreightWaves or a BCB Live Freight and Review. Here we have it right here, and John, we're going to look at what we have here is the retail to wholesale fuel spread. First, tell us what that means.
Okay, so this is a very simple chart, but I think it's very indicative. So FreightWaves does in Sonar, has a series called DTS.USA. We'll look at that in a minute. That's basically a retail series nationally, and it has a wholesale series called ULSDR.USA. And what we do is we just subtract the wholesale from the retail, and shows you the spread. So if it starts to get out of whack, kind of too high, it means really that retail prices are a little bit high relative to wholesale, and they're probably going to come down.
Gotcha.
If it gets too low, it's the opposite. So last year, for example, where's 2020 here?
There we go. We're all the way to April.
So you can see. Right. Because you can see in April 2020 it got very high because here's the thing about wholesale diesel. Wholesale diesel prices will plummet with the spot price.
Gotcha.
Okay, we can talk about that for another half hour, but they do. So Exxon's wholesale price, Mobil, Chevron wholesale price, it does come down. Retail prices are stickier.
Gotcha.
They're slower. So it got really high then. And then, it kind of came, this number tends to be in around the 1 to 105 area, occasionally a drop more. Well, look what had happened in the last couple of weeks.
Right.
What happened was the spot prices soared, the wholesale prices soared with it,
Gotcha.
and the retail prices were slow to react. So within a span of like 5 or 6 days, you had the all-time low.
Wow, yeah, right here.
Okay, I think that was 2 weeks ago tomorrow. And then within like 4 or 5 days, you had the all-time high as the spot prices and the wholesale prices plummeted. It's insane. I mean, this is really, truly historic what's going on.
That doesn't even make it. I mean, I'm just trying to fathom here. Here it is 2 weeks ago, all-time low, and here we are today, all-time high.
Right, because you had the wholesale prices. The wholesale prices had soared, and retail took its time to catch up. And then the commodity and wholesale prices plummeted, and retail really hadn't moved that much. So the retail numbers, can we just...
Yeah. Hey, give me DTS real quick. Sorry about that. Here we go.
Okay,
Bam.
So this is our retail price, and you can see it took a little while to take off, and then when it took off, it really took off, and then it kind of held steady for a while. Because right now, if you're a retailer, if you're filling, and some of these retail stations, I remember talking to the owner of one, a fairly big one time. He said he gets a new load every 13 hours. That's gasoline, not diesel.
Yes.
But how do you price it when your wholesale number is just going bananas like that? So you can see that kind of, even though it's been a little steady there the past couple of days, it's steady because they really don't know what to do.
Wow, that's insane. And when you think about this for the drivers, the independent contractor, especially that's out on the road, well, the independent contractor, he's not protected, or she's not protected with any kind of fuel surcharge. They play the spot market. It's great when it's great, and so I'm just going to say this: the spot market today is not bad. However, it doesn't take into consideration this. The increase of the fuel pricing at the pump. The independent contractor that way overpaid for a truck in the last year, the used truck that they're driving right now, I don't know how they're going to make it right now. I mean, if this sustains itself for another 30, 60 days, even close to this, I don't know how they make it.
Here's the thing. I mean, if it sustained itself and held at a steady level,
gotcha.
I would imagine that's easier. It's the volatility that kills you.
Gotcha.
Because you might have booked a rate down here, assuming a price around here, and then it soars. I mean, if it went up to, let's say, 505 and stayed in that range for 6 months, your spot rates would reflect that. But it's when the price soars and you've got spot rates booked in. One of the things I do is I do listen in on some of the trucking company earnings calls, along with my colleague Todd Maiden. And what's fascinating is in this past quarter, they really didn't talk about fuel prices at all because they have a very efficient fuel surcharge. They pass it on. Now, if you listen to like the earnings calls or the comments of CEOs at the big shippers, oh yeah, they'll tell you. So the fuel surcharge is really, I think the fact of who's talking about it on their earnings calls tells you how efficient it is at pushing the prices to the shippers.
Yeah, that's definitely, the shippers, they feel the pain, right?
Oh, yeah, very
on this
much.
Right here. And again, the consumer and we're not even talking the big truck, the consumer buying gasoline right now, they're still filling that tank up, spending extra money at the fuel right now. It keeps them from buying goods out there. And I'm telling you, we saw that when we looked at the freight review today. We saw the volume jump, and it wasn't just a month and a half ago at 15,000, and now it's at 13,700. The volume it's crazy to see how much less volume is going on right now than it was a month ago, let alone 6 months ago.
I mean, you could argue that people got tired of buying stuff, and they bought stuff a long time ago, but to have that kind of a drop at the same time that fuel is soaring, the chances of that being coincidence, pretty small.
Wow. Hey, John, I want to thank you for being on BCB Live. We're the safest station in the nation, and we come here with folks like John, because you bring some validity to explain to the drivers out there, what's going on in here. And listen, it doesn't make it any easier on them. You're still going to pay that price at the pump. John, I don't know, before we close this, what's your advice to the owner-operator out there?
That's a tough one. Well, let me just give some numbers that I think that are significant. Because there's a lot of political blame. It's Joe Biden's fault, it's this kind of thing. I think there's a really good number that really sticks out. So the world oil market is a little less than 100 million barrels a day, every day, okay? There's going to be about a drop in demand, more than the demand is going to go up this year less than they thought because of the price. The International Energy Agency, which puts out a monthly report and everybody looks at it, okay? They came out with their report last week and they said that as a result of companies and countries refusing to take Russian oil, that's going to knock about 3 million barrels a day of Russian supply off the market. They're just going to have to shut it in. There's nothing they can do with it. That's a lot. A 3% sudden loss of supply in a balanced market is a lot in the commodity world. And so, how do you make up for that 3 million barrels a day? There's not a lot of good ways. If the negotiations with Iran are successful, then they can maybe bring in another million to 1.2 million, 1.3 million. Maybe you can kind of turn your eye to what a miserable government in Venezuela is. You take off some sanctions, you get another 200,000 to 300,000 barrels a day. How do you film the rest of that 3 million barrels a day? Well, unfortunately, the only way you do it is demand destruction. And demand destruction happens when the price gets so high that people stop using it as much as they did.
Wow.
You're seeing it in the OTVI. That means fewer truck trips.
Yep.
So I don't have any really good notes out there for an independent owner operator. I really feel for them. I would say that the craziness that you've seen now is that kind of volatility is so beyond anything that anybody has ever seen that it wouldn't continue. I would think that at a certain point you'll get some stability in rates, stability in prices. They may be very high prices, but ultimately freight rates are going to have to reflect the price of fuel.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't, then a lot of trucks will get put on the fence, and then the rates will go up. So it's the volatility that's got to be killing them.
And it's not as simple. You can't just turn the switch on here in the United States and start producing this, right?
No, I mean, look, the U.S. is expected to produce about an additional 900,000 barrels a day this year over last year. That's a good amount. That's about 7%. So, a few years ago, if you look back at the numbers, the production numbers from like 2017, 2018, the U.S. was producing more. It was producing over 13 million barrels a day, and now we're at around 11.6. Well, what happened? Well, first of all, you had the pandemic. But the other thing is, a few years ago, they were generating no free cash flow. They borrow lots of money, drill lots of wells, produce lots of hydrocarbon, take their profits, pay it all back in debt, use the whole 100% of the profits to pay back debt. No free cash flow, no dividends. This is utterly unsustainable. Wow. And the industry is quite clear on this, that they're not doing that anymore. They're gonna operate like grown-ups. Yeah. They're gonna have a business model that produces free cash flow, that pays dividends. So they're not looking to stick that many holes in the ground. But even having said that, the estimate is another 800,000 to 900,000 barrels a day this year versus last year.
Hey, John, I want to thank you. Very knowledgeable. Love having you on the show. Again, I'm going to tell you, big fan of you. Watch you all the time on FreightWaves. Don't forget to watch John on FreightWaves as well. This is Rick and John. We're here at BCB Live, Las Vegas. We'll come back in about 60 seconds.